Hi, I'm Gotham City Crime Lord the Black Mask. Many of you might be surprised to know that I'm here today to ask you to support the Gotham City Police Department in the upcoming elections. Given the recent atrocities against supervillains in the slum prison known as Arkham City, how could I not? These human rights violations were committed not by the Gotham PD, but rather a private military firm called Tiger. I myself was the victim of a brutal beating at their hands, and others, such as the world-famous villain The Joker, were even less fortunate. He was denied vital medical aid when he needed it most under their watch. Please, keep the power in the hands of the police. They know when a suspect has had enough, and they know that a supervillain should only be taken down by a fully licensed and accredited member of Batman Incorporated. So please, support the Gotham City Police, and let's keep the power out of the hands of private security companies like Tiger. Vote yes on Proposition 86 this year, and let's put the police back in Arkham City. Remember, a vote no is a vote for a world where mass-murdering psychopaths are killed after they've killed a bunch of people. And I don't want to live in a world like that. Thank you. And enjoy the show. Hi everyone, and welcome back to Comic Book Issues. I'm your host, the Last Angry Geek. And welcome to another of my flashback episodes. These episodes are dedicated to slightly older books. Normally I like to review titles that are no more than a year old, but once in a while I find something old has become relevant again and deserves a second glance. In this particular case, I found a book that I missed the first time around and is just too good not to share. With that in mind, written by the team of Ed Brubaker and Greg Rucka and drawn by Micah Lark, we follow the exploits of the Gotham City Police in Gotham Central. Gotham Central was published beginning in 2004 and lasted some 40 issues. It follows the major crimes unit of the Gotham City Police after the events of No Man's Land, when Gotham City was isolated from the rest of the United States by an earthquake and quickly abandoned by outside authorities. Gotham is once again a thriving city while Jim Gordon has stepped down from his role as police commissioner. The only familiar cops left are Maggie Sawyer, recently promoted to captain after serving in Metropolis, and Renee Montoya, introduced originally in the Batman the Animated Series cartoon, just like Harley Quinn was. In fact, this book would serve as the first chapter in a long story for Renee. After Gotham Central was cancelled, Greg Rucka made Renee a part of 52, where she teamed with ex-girlfriend Kathy Kane, the new Batwoman, and eventually becomes the new Question, all spiraling out of events that happen in this title. Now, Gotham Central works best when it reads like a police procedural show. Imagine it as Law & Order Gotham City. Except the muggers, murderers, and rapists are all replaced by psychotic clowns, cat burglars with a feline fetish, and mobsters who wear death masks. I pity those fools most of all. Yeah. The first issue opens with two detectives, Marcus Driver and Charlie Fields, investigating a tip about a missing girl, Bonnie Lewis. A knock on a door ends up being a horrible mistake when they find themselves attacked by Mr. Freeze. Fields is killed by Freeze's ice gun, and the madman taunts Driver. Maggie Sawyer's coming on duty as word of Freeze's assault hits. Fields' body, frozen into a near ice state, has shattered, and Driver's hands are stuck to his gun. The Force then begins to investigate Freeze, with Montoya taking point. There are no bat computers or magic forensic techniques, just good old-fashioned police work as the GCPD tries to find Mr. Freeze. They interrogate his former henchmen, look into businesses providing industrial-strength refrigeration, and even probe the black market for diamonds, as that's what Freeze's technology runs on. Diamond-powered freeze tech? I think that's left over from Batman and Robin. Along with...
Tonight's forecast. A freeze is coming.
Meanwhile, Marcus has to deal with Charlie's death and the ramifications of one of Batman's foes showing up. The cops know Mr. Freeze is going to be nearly impossible for them to bring in, even though honor demands they catch a cop killer themselves. They also know that sometimes turning to Batman is their only option, and that humiliates these proud officers to no end. With time running out and all leads exhausted, Driver finally puts two and two together and realizes Freeze's earlier comments about education were a clue. He's planning to attack the commencement ceremony at Gotham University, where Jim Gordon will be accepting an honorary degree. Knowing that thousands of lives are at stake, Driver demands the commissioner use the bat signal. The police attempt to provide security, but sure enough, things end with an off-screen battle between Mr. Freeze and Batman. Freeze is defeated, and lives saved. Back in his patrol car leaving the scene, Driver finds out that the kidnapped girl he was searching for at the start of this story has been found, dead. He curses both himself and the Batman before driving off. But for the days when villains left easily decipherable clues behind so that the Batman and police could stop their crimes in advance. Dear Batman, I'm going to rob the bank tomorrow at noon. Love, the Riddler. Man, he's just not trying anymore. Love. Issues 3 through 5 follows Marcus Driver as he searches for Bonnie's killer. Temporarily partnered with Romy Chandler, he wants to close this case so that Fields' board at the station has no outstanding cases. Starting with a crime scene investigation of where Bonnie's corpse was found, Chandler and Fields work their way through the case, interrogating Bonnie's parents, and the parents of the child she babysat the night she disappeared. Set against the investigation, the arsonist known as the Firebug has reappeared, and neither the cops nor Batman can seem to stop him. The detectives investigate Bonnie's bullies, and it turns out she stole a batarang from the scene of a fight between Robin and Killer Croc. Another lead points towards a homeless man in the park, near her babysitting job. This is another dead end, though he points out that his hovel was burned to the ground shortly after her death. The cops try and arrest Firebug, only for things to go badly when he ends up jumping out a window, sans his anti-gravity technology. Superpower rules number 1. If your powers come from a suit and you're not wearing that suit, you don't have those powers. For instance, Firebug couldn't fly in just his dirty undies. I, on the other hand, am wearing my tennis shoes that let me walk through walls. Observe. Ow. Firebug later explains that he's not behind the recent arsons. He's gotten out of the supervillain game and sold his backup suit last year. Tying together all they know about Bonnie's case, Fields has an epiphany and is able to identify the killer, neatly tying it into the Firebug case as well. They call in Mr. Combs, the father who Bonnie babysat for, and Firebug identifies him as the man who bought his armor. The police search his house and find the Firebug's suit. Driver then confronts him. Bonnie was a bit of a snoop and found the suit, setting off an alarm to alert Combs. He followed her home and murdered her so she wouldn't tell anyone he was the new Firebug. Combs freaks out and tries to fry Marcus with a concealed flamethrower, only for Romy to spray him down with a fire extinguisher. Combs is arrested and Fields' case file wiped clean. Later, on the roof, Driver lights the bat signal. He tells the Batman that the police caught Firebug, alone. Batman congratulates him but reminds him that the signal is no toy. Chandler shows up and escorts Driver to the bar to join the rest of the force in a drink. Now, the Mr. Freeze story was co-written by Ed Brubaker and Greg Rucka, while Brubaker alone wrote the Firebug story. I did kind of skim over them, because the real gem, in my opinion, is in the final 5 issues, a solo story written by Greg Rucka that was the real highlight of this first collection. The final 5 issues follow Renee Montoya. We see someone is snapping pictures of her. Jogging in the park, she also receives a summons before heading back into work. Renee spends the day with her perpetually grumpy partner, Crispus Allen. Allen gets into a screaming match with a detective from Robbery who tries to dump a stale case on the MCU because someone might have seen Catwoman at a break-in. Allen decides to close the case just to show up the other department. It seems a lingerie shop was robbed of some expensive clothing. Crispus sees that one of the co-owners has a brother with a record. They ask him to come down to the station and realize he's a junkie. Crispus lets Renee leave early, confident of a quick confession. Later that night, Renee visits her parents and has to endure a long night of questions about when is she going to get married and start a family. Feeling sorry for herself, she picks up the phone and calls someone to meet later. In the morning, she's visited by Detectives Esperanza and Conway from Internal Affairs. They mention a private eye named Brian Selker was murdered after being hired to investigate her for one Marty Lipari. Lipari was arrested by Renee for murder, but walked when the evidence disappeared. He's suing Renee, hence the earlier summons. Selker's files on Renee are missing, and the officers warn her to be careful. Arriving at the station, Allen is aglow with his successful bust from earlier, but another detective arrives and comments on how photogenic Renee is. Heading towards a crowd at the bulletin board, Renee finds a picture taped up of her kissing a woman. The detective needles Renee for the woman's name. She quietly tells him it's Daria before walking out. Allen looks over Montoya's files on Lipari and leaves, as Renee is called into Sawyer's offices. Sawyer, a fellow lesbian, tries to reach out to her, but Renee is in no mood to be consoled. As Crispus watches, Renee has to put up with jokes to her face and slurs behind her back from her fellow officers. At home, she's visited by her younger brother Benny, who tells her that a copy of the same picture was mailed to her parents. They were hysterical, but he calmed them down by telling them it was a fake. Benny doesn't feel their parents should suffer because of who Renee is. Things quickly degrade into yelling. After the fight, Renee goes to meet Daria at a club. She walks Daria home and mentions that Internal Affairs is probably looking at her for the private investigator's death. They kiss goodnight, but a moment later Renee is confronted by Lipari, who filmed their whole encounter. After a few crude comments, Renee beats him down and takes his film. Lipari limps home only to be confronted by someone and shot to death. The next day, MCU detectives are called to his apartment where they find heroin, half of which is missing, and are informed that the murder weapon is registered to Renee. At that same time, just as Internal Affairs shows up, Renee finds that her backup gun has been stolen and the missing heroin is in her safe. Wow, I wonder which heroin it was. Batgirl? Zatanna? Maybe the Huntress. Huh? Oh, the new stuff? Oh, okay. My bad. In this case, heroin apparently does not refer to a female superhero, but rather a form of illegal narcotic. I hope this clears things up. Renee is arrested and, unaware of Lipari's death, blames him as the person responsible for the heroin and missing gun. Renee freaks out when she sees Daria's been brought in to make a statement. It's then she finds out Lipari's been murdered. Daria confirms the earlier fight between Lipari and Montoya before realizing he's dead and clamming up. Renee refuses to confess, continuing to protest her innocence. She's charged with Lipari's murder. Alan goes to visit her in prison and asks what this is all about. She tells her this is Harvey Dent's doing. Two-Face has set her up. In court, Renee finds she's received a new lawyer provided by Bruce Wayne. She pleads not guilty, but as she taken out her emotional family arrives. Before anything can be said, Renee's mother recognizes Daria and icily asks her daughter if that's the woman from the picture. Back at the station, Crispus finds he's been assigned a new partner, rookie detective Josie McDonald. They get off to a rough start, but she quickly offers to help him clear Montoya. Renee boards a prison bus leaving the courthouse. En route, men in animal masks and machine guns hold it up and fight their way on board, taking Renee while freeing the other prisoners. As other detectives accuse Montoya of running, Crispus defends her as the target of a kidnapping, but doesn't mention Dent as he has no proof yet. Josie notices one of the mailboxes was dented in the commotion, leaving a paint smear behind. Back in the police parking lot, Josie sees a dented car and matches the paint to the mailbox at the scene of the crime. Crispus and a SWAT team move in and arrest Conway, one of the Internal Affairs detectives who arrested Renee. Meanwhile, Renee wakes up to find Two-Face taking care of her. He brings her into a dining room and then flips out when one of his guards is caught checking her out. She calms him down and then questions Harvey on why he ruined her life. His answer is simple. It's the way the coin came down. Meanwhile, Crispus gets nowhere with his investigation of Conway, who claims he was helping Two-Face after he threatened his son's life. Crispus starts giving details to a Detective Crow, including that the only time Conway and Two-Face met was in a suite at some hotel. It's only then he realizes it wasn't Crow he was talking to. Seeing the Batman take off, Crispus follows the Caped Crusader, knowing he'll lead him to Renee. At dinner, Two-Face calmly explains that he used Lipari to out her and then murdered him to frame her. However, once Wayne's lawyers got involved, he knew she'd get out of jail, and so he kidnapped her to make Renee seem like a fugitive on the run. Two-Face fell in love with her during the events of No Man's Land, and sees her closeted sexuality as meaning she's living two lives, just like him. He destroyed her life and reputation so she'd have nowhere to turn except to him. Renee finds out the hotel is buried underground, a casualty of the recent earthquake. She rejects Harvey, but this pushes him over the edge, and Two-Face pistol whips her. He decides Daria is standing between them and flips a coin sealing Renee's girlfriend's fate. He calls for his guards, but they don't show, giving Renee a moment to tackle Harvey and try and get his gun. They struggle for a few moments before Batman arrives and subdues Two-Face. He tells Renee he's taking care of things, but she points out that it's only a matter of time before Two-Face breaks out again, and then what? Batman counters that if he hadn't interrupted them, they'd have struggled until either she or Harvey was dead. He's kept her from becoming a killer. At the station, Renee finds her life restored. The Gotham police have dropped all charges and apologize for their mistakes. Later, Daria drives her to talk to her parents. Daria waits outside while Renee goes up. The light changes to show that a long time has passed. When Renee finally comes back out, she tells Daria that her parents have rejected her. She told them she was gay, and they told her she would burn in hell and to never come home again. The story ends. Not happily, but it does end with Renee crying into Daria's arms. The really neat thing about Gotham Central is how human these detectives are in a world full of inhuman characters, how utterly normal this title's tone is. Let's take a closer look at what does and doesn't work in Gotham Central. The best thing going for this book was that Batman is a minor character, appearing only in brief cameos. Would this title work if every 5 minutes the Commissioner was up on the roof having coffee with Batman and mapping out their investigations? No. The relationship between the Gotham police and Batman is best described as tense. They resent Batman for being able to close their cases and the fact that sometimes he's the only resource they have against the freaks of Gotham. Also, these are damn good mysteries. While the whole identity of the Firebug requires a suspension of disbelief by the reader, the earlier Mr. Freeze case is almost a reflection of the 60s Batman show. What with a few choice puns of Freeze leading the detectives to uncover his choice of targets. You could say that without Mr. Freeze's help, this would be a cold case. Oh, fine. I suppose you'd like more of this.
All right, everyone. Chill.
The final Two-Face case actually does a good job of confusing things. We see Crispus acting very sinister right before Lipari is murdered. We even have reason to doubt Renee is innocent, as she seems a little too nonchalant with the heroin in her kitchen. Also, by dropping the better-known characters like Jim Gordon, you lose the emotional baggage and backstory that goes with them. There's no crippled daughter fuddling information to superheroes for why Batman suddenly shows up. The characters are more or less ciphers, which lets the authors build them up to the needs of the story. Crispus is a hothead, but is he really Lipari's killer? Will Driver be able to close the case solo, or will the need to use Batman destroy his self-confidence? Special attention has to be paid to Renee's arc in the final story. We really get to see just how painful and humiliating it can be to be outed. Suddenly everyone is treating you differently. You're the butt of jokes. Your parents are hysterical. Renee puts it best when her brother tells her he lied about the photo being touched up. It helps that they didn't want to believe the truth. That one line tells us all we need to know about her parents, so their eventual rejection of her also rings true, but that doesn't make the pain any less hard for Renee. Greg Rucka is to be commended for how he handled these scenes. Where the book struggles is in being read at this late date. We are well past No Man's Land, and in fact I never read those stories, so I had no idea that Renee and Two-Face had some sort of pre-existing relationship. The book at the time was tied to current Batman continuity, but would have been better served by severing ties to those stories. But that's just not practical in mainstream publishing, especially when your book is connected to one of your biggest characters. Michael Lark's art isn't great, but I will admit that it's well suited for this title. The art is heavily stylized and uses a lot of thick black lines. It's not pretty, but it is gritty. I did admire that Batman, Mr. Freeze, Two-Face all look like real people, of sorts. Freeze is not wearing some high-tech cyber armor, but something that looks like it's right out of 50s sci-fi. Batman isn't a muscle-bound superhero, he's some dude in a cowl that we never get a good look at. Two-Face isn't particularly gruesome, he's just some guy with a half-green face. Hey, this book is a real treat. I just wish I discovered it earlier. There are 4 collections out, and I plan on buying the next 3 very soon. Again, the drama and emotional impact of this book is in trying to do your job to the best of your ability, but imagine how humiliating, how emasculating it would be if somebody more talented came in and did it for you. That would be devastating.
I'll say, I imagine it'd destroy you. Anyway, this book is a must-read for any fans of police drama and or Batman. I give Gotham Central issues 1 through 10, 4 out of 5 stars. I'm the Nostalgia Critic, and I'll see you next time on Comic Book Issues. Not really.